Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Serious Space, Robert Ritchie, and today I'm presenting Chaos, which is a covert channel strategy that shows how we can exploit one of the important low-level functionalities of Wi-Fi networks to establish a timing-based secret communication channel that is quite fast and reliable. Any normal Wi-Fi network, which is an 802.11 network infrastructure mode, has two main components, an access point and a set of clients. And each member of the network is called a station, and there are many different types of radio frames that are exchanged between these stations, and they are usually categorized into four groups of management, control, data, and extension frames. During the course of investigation of some of these frames, we noticed an interesting behavior in one of them, which is technically denoted by type 00, subtype 100, which is known as beacon frames. Beacon frames are out there to achieve three goals. The first goal is announcing the presence of the network. They work like network heartbeat. So as long as an access point is healthy and alive, it keeps generating beacons. The second goal is providing necessary network parameters to the surrounding stations to be able to associate with the access point and connect to the network, for example, encryption parameters. There's a third crucial role that is less discussed and fewer people know about it, which is time synchronization. Any Wi-Fi network has an internal, independent, high-precision clock that must be persistently synchronized between all stations for the lowest level of the network, which is the physical layer, to function properly. This timer is called Timing Synchronization Function, or in short, TSF, that is used for power management, signal scheduling, and other low-level radio routines. The way that IEEE standard mandates and defines the synchronization procedure for this type of clock is through the beacon frames moderated by the access point. The access point firmware schedules periodic transmissions of the beacon frames in which it reports the current TSF clock for the other stations to read and synchronize. The interval that is defined between each two consecutive beacons is called target beacon transmission time, and it is defined at 102,400 microseconds sharp, which means that we have around 10 beacons per second per each access point. And by the way, you can imagine how many beacon frames are traveling around you at any point of time, given the sheer number of access points in modern cities. But what we can infer from this formal discussion, this formal definition in the standard, is that there should be a gap of 1 TBTT or 100 time units between each two consecutive announcements of the TSF counter by the access point. And up to this point is what has been formally discussed in the standard. But what happens in reality is a little different. There is a degree of imprecision in terms of how this clock is measured and reported. And this happens due to various reasons. For example, interference from other radio sources, or the fact that the medium might be busy or might not be busy at the moment that the next beacon is scheduled to be transmitted to the antenna connector. Or natural physical barriers, for example, temperature. A slight change in the ambient temperature can affect the nominal frequency of the crystal oscillator or the resonator that is used by the access point to count the time units. It can count a little faster or slower based on temperature. So there are some fluctuations, which means that there will be a force factor, the way that you see at the bottom of the screen, which we call TSF noise, that is included in this equation. And this is the part that is not discussed in the standard, and this is the part that opens up a space for exploitation. If we want to see how this noise looks like, this is the TSF projection of 4 random access points made by different manufacturers. And all access points behave quite similarly regarding this issue, including your home Wi-Fi router. If you measure the TSF noise of your router, you will also see something similar to this. However, this noise does not create any functional problems. The reason is that as long as we have around 10 beacons per second from the access point, it is guaranteed that all the functional goals that are defined for the access point are achieved, which means that we will have a relatively fast passive scan by the surrounding stations, and also TSF synchronization will happen correctly. However, we have found out that this type of natural noise has some unique characteristics that leading to some side effects that create an excellent opportunity to establish a fast and reliable timing-based covert channel that is surprisingly reliable and extremely difficult to detect, stop, or to prevent if done correctly. The first characteristic is the way that beacons are defined to work, which is the periodic transmission nature of the beacons. We don't need to encourage or trick the access point to generate them. As long as an access point is healthy, it keeps generating them. And whatever exploitation opportunity is provided by this type of frame, it will be provided 10 times per second. And the other characteristic here is the way that the resolution works here. This is the high-level structure of a beacon frame at the MAC layer, and we can see a lot of fields, and in particular, we are interested in a 64-bit timestamp that holds the current value of the TSF counter in microseconds. Now take a look back at the previous figure. What is the time unit of the vertical axis? I hope it's visible. It is also microsecond, which is also emphasized in this equation for the epsilon component. In other words, the resolution of this natural noise matches with the resolution of the software layer timestamp that is directly reflected at the MAC layer. This greatly enhances the timing measurements on top of which that we want to build this channel, which in turn significantly increase the channel capacity and stability. Now, the way that we want to exploit this situation is that we want to use a fraction of the background TSF noise to modulate it and embed a separate layer of secret data within the noise itself in a way that is discoverable by a receiver that is aware of this covered channel and has access to the correct configuration set. Now I want to very briefly talk about how this communication model works and then a little bit about the results given the time limit, but I definitely encourage you to refer to the paper in which we have provided in-depth discussion and more examples in great detail. In chaos, we have one physical transmitter irrespective of how many access points we target. And then we have any number of receivers. The transmitter does not know the receiver and creates a one-way broadcast channel. Then we have a configuration set that contains a couple of values, including the set of access points created by the transmitter, which are divided into two groups of tap and cap access points for covert transmission, and a statistical adaptation to the environment noise, respectively. Then we have a delay step, which is an arbitrary value within a specific range that is used to translate the raw TSF noise into discrete numbers to form our TSF component of state sequences. Then we have a tap rotation key that is used to dynamically change the membership status of the defined access points in the tap and cap sets. Then based on this configuration, each member creates a secret permutation space that is used to convert the state sequences to data bits. We define two permutation components. The first component is the order of the beacons itself. Given the density and frequency of beacon transmission, they don't follow any specific order. And the order of beacons in each burst, and each burst is one batch of beacon transmission, has a special meaning for us in this work, and creates our first permutation component. The second permutation component is the magnitude of the TSF noise represented as a delay level for each defined tap access point, calculated at runtime on demand based on the defined delay step in the configuration set. Then these two permutation components are joined and uniquely mapped to one member in the permutation space, which is then translated to a bit stream and backwards. From the perspective of an adversary, before and after the moment chaos starts transmission, nothing changes in the environment. It's just background TSF noise that always exists, and no new frames are added to the network. From the perspective of a receiver, however, this noise now has a meaning, and if the receiver has access to these parameters that I mentioned, it will be able to recover the correct state sequences and decode the secret message that is being transmitted by the transmitter. As I mentioned, we designed the tap rotation strategy, and the reason for this is that we noticed benign TSF noise in the environment follows a normal or semi-normal distribution. And we want the chaos output to also follow the same mathematical patterns to increase the cost of adversarial measurements and make it more difficult to distinguish the noise that is modulated by chaos from the noise that is created by other access points. We also address the issue of missed frames using RX burst synchronization, which means that even if some frames are missed at the receiver side, which can always happen even given the best hardware out there, the receiver is still able to recover the correct payload from the background noise. And all of this have been explained in more detail in the paper. But it is important to mention at this point that to run and use this system, you don't need any special equipment, or you don't need to change the firmware. All of this can be executed and run in a small low-powered computer like a Raspberry Pi device stored in a vehicle. Now I want to give you a glimpse into the experimental results, the way that the system works. The data transmission rate here depends heavily on the configuration set that we define for the system, and there are different aspects of how we can define it for the stations that we target. But we have explained in the paper why we chose these numbers as a default configuration set. And using 6 access points and 216 delay levels, we can create roughly around 73,000 trillion members in our sample space, and we are able to convey hundreds of bits per second using chaos, which for a timing-based covert channel, not only it is significant, but I would say it's quite unusual. And if we want to see how the tap rotation strategy works here, so in the left, we can see the noise distribution of transmitting 2 sample payloads by chaos. And as it is obvious, it doesn't look like anything like a normal distribution or semi-normal distribution, but we can adjust how tap rotation strategy should use in terms of how aggressively we should enforce this noise adaptation strategy. And as we go towards right, we exactly get what we want from this noise that is modulated by chaos and the noise that we see in the environment for the benign TSF. So TSF exploitation happens because of a design issue. And it seems that the only guaranteed way to address this and make sure it can't happen is coming up with a new synchronization strategy at the protocol level. It's not something that can be affected by users or even can be disabled at the firmware level. But we have discussed different aspects of mitigation, whether or not they are effective or to what extent they can be effective in the paper. But it is important to note that covert channels in general have their own legitimate and useful use cases as well. And of course, this model can be used for those cases in which stealth communication is required due to sensitivity of the situation and privacy matters. TSF has other issues as well that makes it possible to carry out other forms of exploitation, including traffic analysis and correlation attacks. This is comprehensively discussed in the paper using a couple of examples for Tor network. And eventually, just before the conference, I also added a blog post as a complementary material to talk more about the technicality of this project. And I provided some proof of concept examples. And it shows how chaos actually works in action. So please feel free to check that out. And this is an open research. We believe that 822.11 protocol, given all its complexities, has a great potential for stealth communication. So if you would like to chat about this or similar topics, please feel free to reach out to me. At the end, I appreciate your time, and I take a few questions. Thank you.
Let us thank the speaker. Any questions? I go to the microphone and ask. It's the morning. So I'll start the questions in case someone else please go. You mentioned that mitigation can come with firmware patches, right? Can you elaborate on this? Like what contains?
Can you please repeat your question?
In the mitigation slide, you said you have to change the firmware. You have to patch the firmware, right?
If we want to fix it, yes. We need
so
to
what kind of patch would that be?
We need a completely new synchronization protocol. So the current synchronization is dependent on this equation that I showed in one of the slides. And as long as this synchronization strategy works this way, it is not possible to patch it. We can mitigate it to some extent using some sort of hacky ways, but in general, it is not possible to stop this.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like patching, right? You just change completely what the protocol does.
Yeah, but the ultimate ideal solution is that we need to find another synchronization strategy.
But, okay, on the plus side, that can work with the same hardware, right? The idea is that at least you can save the hardware.
If you
Even
have
though
a way,
the protocol is radically different?
Well, if you have a way to install a company sort of release patch for your home access point, yeah, it is possible to patch it.
All right. Any other questions? If not, let us thank the speaker again.